Is it like blue for you, the recording thing? Everyone can see that?
It just says Justine is recording the call, so it's good.
Okay, good. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our September fireside slash webinar slash, I don't know what you want to call this, our Q&A, our little Q&A today. And this is hosted by Asian Wonder Women. We have this online event every month, and this month we're joined by Ivy Xu and Joyce Ho to talk about working holiday visas and their experiences with them. And a little bit about Asian Wonder Women before we get started. Asian Wonder Women is an online Facebook community group that was started and founded by Ivy, who's here today, and Emily Fang as well. And it was created in 2020 during the pandemic for female Asians who are quote unquote nomadic, and that term has many meanings. But whether you're working a remote job, a location independent digital entrepreneur, an expat teaching English abroad in a foreign country, a frequent traveler with a home base, or someone who just desires a nomadic life, Asian Wonder Women is for you. And so we are now organically grown to a size of over 2,000 women, which is really exciting. And we are in various cities like Taipei, New York, San Francisco, Toronto, Singapore, and more. And so I'm really excited to have both Joyce and Ivy here with us today. And let's start with, what is a working holiday visa? Because it's a term that I've heard many times, and it's actually something I've also researched myself. And today, actually, we're joined by all of us. We're Canadian. So we'll be telling you about the working holiday visa from a Canadian perspective. But when I looked on Canada's government website, it says that if you're a Canadian citizen aged 18 to 35, International Experience Canada offers you the opportunity to work and travel abroad, and it provides you a path for a work permit or visa to work and explore in one of over 30 countries and territories. And agreements with these countries are also reciprocal, meaning that folks from those countries can also come to Canada for working holiday visas, which is really cool. And so I think the foundational idea of what a working holiday visa is quite similar throughout these different places, but we'll speak specifically today to the Canadian experience. And so I'm going to throw it to Joyce first to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her and where she did her visa, and then we'll go to Ivy.
Hi, so everyone, my name is Joyce. Thanks for, having the panel for us to kind of share. And I actually did my working holiday in Australia back in April 2022. That's when COVID just kind of started to lift. And then, yeah, that's when I decided that, okay, I'm going to book a one-way ticket to fly from Toronto to Sydney to kind of explore what that country has to offer. So yeah, that's how I started my journey in Australia. I actually stayed there for a little bit more than a year, but the visa actually only lasts for 1 year, and which you can actually apply for a second visa if you go to Australia. And yeah, but I just have the first one so far, and I really had a blast during that time when I went.
Amazing. Well, excited to hear more about it. And Ivy, where did you do your working holiday visa?
Yeah, kind of similar to Joyce. I did my working holiday visa in New Zealand, starting at the end of 2018, and I was actually only there for 3 months. I had working holiday visas, so I applied for them. I got them for New Zealand, Australia, and Japan, because for the year of 2019, my then boyfriend, now husband, and I wanted to take a year off and actually spend it in multiple different locations, which we did, but we didn't end up doing the working holiday anywhere else except for New Zealand, really. We kind of just stopped over Australia and Japan.
Okay, cool. Wow. So because you did the working holiday visa, did it open up some doors for you? What was the rationale behind wanting to travel to different places but doing it under a working holiday visa?
Yeah, my rationale was actually just to stay longer, especially in a country like Japan, which the visa for Canadians is 90 days. We wanted to potentially stay for longer. We didn't end up doing that. For New Zealand, I do think we stayed slightly past the average tourist visa, but the intention was always to do that. But we actually felt like we lived out what we wanted to live out after 3 to 4 months in New Zealand, that we didn't do it again in Australia. I don't know if we want to go into this now, but long story short, I can go into more details later, is that I think we spent 4 months living a lifestyle where we were in a van, which a lot of working holiday visas do in New Zealand, Australia, and kind of drove around the country. New Zealand is quite small. We managed to cover it in the 3 to 4 months. We did 2 stints on like farms, so working like woofing or workaways, where our labor of 4 hours a day kind of paid for our accommodation and food that was provided for free. And I think just that lifestyle, if we went to Australia, we would have done something similar. And I thought we had experienced it enough. So that's why we stopped.
That makes sense. And yeah, it makes sense that this is like a quote unquote easier way to have a longer stay in a country in which we couldn't have more than 90 days in, because the Canadian passport is quite strong. In most places we can stay for 90 days. But
Yeah.
this makes sense. Was this also the reason you chose to do a working holiday visa, Joyce?
Part of it, and I think my like a long time goal of mine was to go abroad and like be able to work and live there for a long period of time. So, if you're just on the visitor visa, you're not actually able to work. So with this visa that you have, it gives you that option if you want to work or even if you don't want to. So like, I think I would want that option. And speaking of like working for accommodation, I actually also did one in Australia where I went to like a local host family and then I kind of just helped to like take care of like her house and do a little bit of like housework, playing with her kids for like a few hours per day. And then I did that for like a month. And that was like in exchange for food and accommodation as well. So being said, I don't think you need to have a working holiday visa to do so, but it was an interesting experience that I did in Australia.
Hmm. Do you feel like the type of work that you were able to find, like as a foreigner on a working holiday visa, was it quite, um, what would I say? Like I've heard that the industries that you can find work in are quite limited, I would say. Like
Mm.
it's easier to find jobs at a cafe or at a restaurant or so and
Yeah.
so. So like were the types of jobs that you were able to find quite narrow in the options, or was it easy? Was it hard to find jobs? What was that like?
I would say yes, it can be a little narrow because of your status. Like, let's say if you wanted to apply for a like an office job or whatever job, they may look at you and think like, oh, you only have it for like 1 year. So I would only take you as like a cafe worker, like nothing like too serious or that kind of sense. And plus, like Australia is very famous for having a lot of farm jobs. So most like working holiday people would go to like a farm or they would work at some, you know, they even go to like mines to work and then which you can make really good money working at a mine and then like yeah just random like coffee shop jobs that kind of stuff. But I think for me I was lucky in terms of I went when they first opened the whole country, so they really needed people in like every single industry. So during that time I think I was lucky that I was in a good spot to be able to find work.
Mm. That's I think maybe like bittersweet, right? Because the country was
Yeah.
shut off and then you had all these opportunities when you got there. So good for you though.
Yeah, yeah, I was very fortunate for that.
I want to add to that actually. So even though I only worked on a farm type of job, it's because that's what I wanted at the time. But I ran into a lot of different people who, like through my travels, not just in New Zealand, who did working holidays themselves. And one of them actually ended up moving to Australia from the US because they actually started off in like some kind of marketing role, like explored a whole different career. I do have to preempt this with like, I'm pretty sure that most working visas only allow you to work at a job for up to 6 months and then you have to switch. So most people go in with the intention of working for a few months and then traveling for the rest of the time. It's more as a financial support to travel. Like, I think that's the intention of what most people do. And Australia, especially, is like very, very set up for that kind of infrastructure where there's lots and lots of jobs being posted. They're super used to seasonal workers.
Yeah.
I also know someone who did it in Japan, and I just want to tell her story because she's in the community. Her name is Linda, and we went to middle school together. And she was the first person that did a working holiday that I knew. And she went to Japan about a year after graduating, and she didn't know what she wanted. She just wanted to live in a different country, and ended up in Japan through her hostel network, found someone who owned the hostel network and needed help with like real estate sales to expats. So then she started in like as like a real estate agent, almost like showing different places to new expats and people who moved in. She did that only for a little bit to like pay for housing and stuff. And then through that expat network, met some people, I guess, who were coming in, and then became an investment banker recruiter in Japan for expats. And
Wow.
she has no background in this. Like she was modeling in New York, I think, before. And then so she did that, fell in love with Japan, extended her visa. So working holidays, you can most countries allow you to extend for another year. So then she was there for 2 years, started this again whole new career in like the finance field, decided she didn't like it anymore, actually ended up leaving Japan, but found her way back and then started a company bringing people to Kamikatsu, the sustainability village in Japan where there's like zero waste. And then now has a boyfriend in Japan, in Tokyo, who's half Japanese and is now working in the luxury travel industry. I'm like, what a life of like every single industry. She has a working visa now, but I just mean like when you step into a new country, there's like all these possibilities, right? So I think that you can create whatever it is that you want for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that story embodies exactly why like Asian Wonder women love travel and want these opportunities. Like you never know what's behind that next door when you step into that new world and what sort of opportunities are available to you because you can't see outside of the box that you currently live in until you step out of it, right? And then, yeah, it's really exciting. So good for her. Good for you, Linda.
Yeah, I'll send this to her.
Girl.
She's been such an inspiration. Like I see her every 2 years. Oh, in between like her 2 Japan stints, she also taught like a private kindergarten or like situation English in like China. So I saw her there. She was writing a book, and that's how she rediscovered Japan and like the sustainability culture because she followed a writer that wrote about it. Yeah, I think that that's the essence of Asian Wonder Woman, exactly, Justine, of like, hey, there's like so much that you can do out there. You can live so many different lives. And I think there's a lot of women who embody that. And Linda's one of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good for Linda.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of following this like non-traditional path these days, which is so common, but it's wonderful to be part of a community that everyone gets it. Everyone gets it, right? But yeah, back to the working holiday visa for each of you. I'm kind of curious, was there anything you were like nervous or scared about before you left? Like what were the things that were difficult about making the jump to do the working holiday visa? Maybe Joyce, you can start.
Right. I think everything about it was quite scary because I chose to go by myself. Like my friends didn't really want to go with me. And I think it was just the feeling of excitement that you don't know what's ahead, but also that comes with a lot of uneasiness. Like, I actually don't really have that many friends in Australia, nor do I have any family members. Like my mom has this her friend over there, which kind of like took care of me for a little bit. But other than that, like I was pretty much by myself. And it's kind of like when you have so much freedom, like, okay, I give myself this 1 year to just explore whatever. Literally, I could go any direction. But that also means like, okay, where are you going to live? Like, what are you going to do? So that kind of makes everything like really scary. Like, I remember I was like talking to my sister that I was really, really scared before taking the plane. And then she's like, it's okay. Like you just go and things will line up when you get over there. Which it kind of did kind of line up over there, like through, following certain like gut feelings that you have and just being open to taking different opportunities and meeting new people. Like you really can find a way through. Yeah. So I would say even though you're scared, like things can line up for you.
Yeah. And I totally understand the like the option paralysis of like you just were just like, I could do anything. Anything is a lot of things. Like, what am I
Yeah.
supposed to do? So I get that. It can be really daunting when you have too much openness, right? Sometimes it's
Mm,
nice to have someone create that structure for you.
yeah.
But Ivy, for yourself, was there anything that was like difficult, hard, scary for you before you left?
Yeah, so I resonate so much, Joyce, with the yeah, around that line of like you can like everything's kind of open
Yeah.
ended and like you're giving yourself a year to explore. Like I've said those exact words to myself when I like went off, because it just seems like such a whim, you know? It's so unnatural in like our the way that we grew up. Like I was so surprised that my parents are generally fairly supportive. I think they were supportive because I found a boyfriend right before I left. They were super unsupportive in 2018 when I wanted to do the same thing, and then like a year before I actually went off. So my parents definitely care a lot about security, and they can't imagine this path. I'm in China again, and I was telling my cousin like that I haven't caught up since 2019 because of the pandemic, and she's like, "Yeah, in 2018 when you were telling me and like our uncle like about this, when you walked away, the uncle was like American kids or whatever." Um, so I think like what was scary was more actually that timing. Like I remember being so stressed about like, oh my gosh, like I'm looking for inspiration. Why don't I have inspiration yet? When I'm like starting, I was like, I literally have nothing lined up. My only job is to find inspiration on like what I want to do next, or like, you know, lining something up. And I think what was scary was like giving myself this like chance and it not benefiting my life or my career. But I think I was looking at it, I was like 25 when I went on the working holiday trip. I think it was very narrow minded on like what could benefit you. And I think it was such the right move. And I think it led the way, like everything, if you're deciding with the right information, is leading you into the right direction. So I think that was the scariest. It was more of like a mental battle, but I think Joyce, like your story, it just reminds me of that. Like, if you step into the unknown, like, and you keep doing that, you keep like showing yourself that you can do things that you've never done before, you gain so much more self confidence later on to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the self-confidence part, like it really builds your self-confidence when you know you can survive by yourself in like a whole different country, like figuring out like where to live and finding a job when you don't even know anyone in the country. Especially when I went, like finding a job wasn't the problem. It was finding a house that was a problem because there was like a housing crisis. So like, holy crap, like how do you deal with that, right? So, but just believing in yourself and like just thinking like manifesting, I'm gonna find a house, I'm gonna find a house soon, and then and then there you go, you found a nice house. Yeah.
I think I can relate so much to this, even though I'm not on a working holiday visa right now. I'm living abroad for a year for the first time, and I'm living in Taiwan right now. And there are little things about moving to a foreign country that I didn't even consider before I moved here, because my family is Taiwanese and I already speak Mandarin, but I don't read or write, which is why I'm here for the year, to learn to become more fluent and get my reading and writing proficiency up. And I walked into the like cosmetic aisle, let's say, to buy shampoo and conditioner, and I was like, I don't even know the words for shampoo and conditioner, like what they're written, like how they're written on the bottles. And then there was like 20 different brands of shampoo, and I was just overwhelmed. I was just like, I don't know what people use here. I don't know what's good. Should I go cheap? Should I go expensive? Which one's shampoo? Which one's conditioner? And there were like little things about moving abroad that I was just like, whoa, this is a lot. Like, I don't recognize any of the brands here. Nothing feels familiar. Who do I ask? And yeah, it's funny, those little things that like trip you up as you're trying to get used to the culture and the new place that you're in. But I can totally understand housing was also really difficult for me. But shampoo was my number one battle. It was my first battle here.
I would say though, my situation was easier to adapt because I moved to an English speaking country. And I would say like there was not a lot of like culture shock or like be like, oh my God, I don't know how to read signs or I don't know like where shampoos are and stuff. But comparatively to like, let's say you moving to Taiwan or Ivy going to Japan. So maybe there's like some sort of like culture or even like language barrier. It's a really, really big thing. And I've met a lot of people who came from other countries, and I find that they have it even harder than me because first they came here to really learn English, the language, and on top of that, they have to find jobs, they have to find houses, they have to like support themselves. So I think that makes it even more challenging, but also like really rewarding when you're able to like figure it out by yourself.
Yeah, I think that that struggle is a big part of, yeah, like we were saying, building the self-confidence and just building that knowledge within yourself to know that I can take care of myself no matter what, because it's
Mm-hmm.
just it's such a different environment that you're in. So it's really empowering to be able to leave and finish that experience knowing that you did it for yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I actually want to talk a little bit about the finances behind the moves. And I'm curious, Ivy, if you did like van life out of financial reasons or if it's just like a curiosity.
Yeah, my husband and I, then boyfriend, actually wrote a blog about all of our expenses over the 3 months, and like we tally them up. We did van life purely because I thought it would be super fun. I really wanted to change the background, like a backyard, every single day. And I thought, like, I primarily wanted to go to New Zealand or Australia for that reason. And so it was not out of financial reasons. I actually think it's not unless you're super low maintenance, and I actually already was. I think at that time, like we bought like a $4,000 or $5,000 van. Like it was a 2003 like Mitsubishi. It was not like a nice electric like what would the Sprinter vans, like the Mercedes Sprinters that people do now. It was not fancy at all. Okay, like there was no AC. The window fell off at one point when we were driving. Like it literally fell through into the door as I was like hand rolling it down. You had to like pump water by only plugging it in. It was ridiculous. It was very cheap. It was like 20 years old or something. Very old car, and it just had a bed in the back. It wasn't fancy. So I would say that like unless you're super low maintenance, which I met some kids, I guess, who were like just graduated 22 who were, and they lived in their car the whole time and ate like beans and rice because they didn't even have like a cooking stuff. Like that is cheap, okay? But this guy that we worked with on a farm, also working holiday visa from the US, I think he was 22. I was only 25, but it felt like a big difference because I had worked for 3 years and lived in San Francisco. Luckily, San Francisco doesn't make you high maintenance earlier on because you live in a cupboard for like $2,000 a month. Um, so it wasn't that bad. But he had like $20 left before he started looking for a working holiday job. Like $20 in the bank. And then I met another girl who literally almost had zero, and she was looking. She was like looking for a stay work away thing where she can stay for accommodation, get food, and then figure it out too, and like work a part-time job or something. Like a lot of these people kind of really close, and that's how comfortable white people, I guess, feel about this. Like I would freak out if I had less than like I don't know $500 maybe in the bank, but like everyone's fine. Like it's like there's enough social welfare in most of these countries. That's why they let you in. Your parents are still going to help you. For us, I just never want to turn to my mom about like, hey, I'm like super broke. Like that would be like the most embarrassing thing ever. I like told my parents that. But I think like these other kids, they were like, yeah, whatever. And then this guy ended up working on like a fishing ship where he had to like it was all dudes. They had to be like big, and they were literally a bunch of rednecks that take giant blocks of fish from Japan and like put it on some kind of like trolley thing, and it gets lifted up out of the ship, and you would spend like 10 hours in there, and like this guy got stabbed in the foot or something and had to be taken to the hospital. Like it was some crazy stories form when you only have $50 in the bank or something. And so he only worked that for like 14 days or like around 2 weeks, had got to like in the high hundreds, and then he just like left again. Right. So I think you can do it super, super cheap, and you're not going to be short of friends there who do it super, super cheap. For us, when we did our like tally of where we spent our money, we actually only spent half of the nights in the van and half of the nights at Airbnbs because we needed to charge our phones. We needed to shower and do laundry. Like we wanted to like, recover. And so it was actually very expensive. Not as expensive as I travel now, but I remember looking back and be like, wow, I spent way more money than I thought I would spend in New Zealand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And actually, this is like a whole other topic that you touched on that I think would be a really interesting thing to talk about in the future. But like culturally, the way we think about finances is so different. I agree. Like my threshold for what my minimum account balance needs to be at all times is very different from some of my like white friends, essentially.
Yeah. and it's by age group, right? Like I think I was like comfortable with not having I was prepared to be starting at zero after this like sabbatical trip of a year. I was ready to have like $10,000 of like I had that in S&P that I can like pull out if I wanted to start over. But other than that, I thought I would like have a maximum of like $10,000 to my name by the end of this year. Everything else is in my checking, and I was like, no way am I letting that go below like, I don't know, $1,000, $2,000. Like I definitely need to go find a job. Yeah.
And
$5.
yeah,
You couldn't even buy coffee. Like I was like, oh my God.
but I think also a great point too. If you open your mind up to what kind of opportunities are available to you while traveling, you can't even begin to imagine like how much you can do with either no money or like almost no money, right? Because I like, for example, I couch surfed for 4 months. I didn't pay for accommodations for 4 months. Like you
That's
can
awesome.
get away with finding really cheap and free ways to travel, which is, and like people are so generous and it's very interesting when you get out there.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Danica in our group, she's an expert pet sitter. Like not an expert, but she was like, yeah, like the pet house sitters, she's been doing months at a time in different like continents, just pet sitting for like months. She hasn't paid for accommodations for probably years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they're like nice homes. And she gets to walk a dog. Like I would pay to dog sit, I think. You know?
Yeah, like
That's
I
a
would pay
bonus.
the owner to hang out
Yeah,
with the pets, right?
exactly. So yeah.
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 There are
I think,
many, many like smart and other ways to like get around it. Yeah.
yeah, like speaking of like the different ways to like find accommodation, like there are so many platforms. Like I used Workaway, but there's like HelpX and I forget. There's just like a lot of different ones where you can just
Lifting.
find really like interesting like you know, places to do things like work at a farm, like a sailboat, and like anything is fine. Like, I think for me, I chose to work at like a house first because that was like my first like experience like doing this work for accommodation, and somehow I just thought it was like probably safer to do it like at someone's house. And I actually like chatted with the girl, like the host, and then we had like a chat before I joined, and she's like, she's so cool about it. She's like, yeah, I think it's fine. Like, we've done it with so many people before, and you can just come anytime today. Like, our backyard is unlocked, so we're probably not gonna be home when you get here, but you can just go in through the backyard. And I was just like, really? So I actually got there, and the backyard was actually like unlocked. So I actually got into the house, and then I put down my suitcases and everything, and I messaged like my family and also some friends that I knew, the address. I was like, in case like anything happens, like you guys know where to find me and stuff. So that was like really funny. But yeah, it was like the whole idea was like very odd, but I also really wanted to try it at least like once. And I'm really, really glad that I did it. So it was just like a memory, and I want to try something like this again, but maybe not in someone's house, like maybe something like that's different. But speaking of like the financial part, I actually didn't bring that much money over to Australia because given that I had the visa to work, I wanted to not touch my savings as much as possible and then work over there. But of course, I had to bring like some money over to, you know, get started. So I think around like a month and a half in, that's when I got my first job. I worked at the coffee shop, and then so I would still have like a little bit of money left, and then I kept having salary to kind of, you know, keep it going so that I don't end up with $5 because I cannot. And but I have met like people who, yeah, like we'll just be chatting about like how low our bank account is, and it's kind of like a common topic between like backpackers because most of us like didn't come here to be like bougie and rich. Like some people just come with a backpack, and you can imagine like they don't need that much. They don't need to eat like fancy meals, live at a nice hotel every day. So I think generally like people who choose to like backpack or do like a working holiday, some of them are more conscious about their spending, but in general I think they try to keep their expenses low, knowing that you're really there by yourself. And then not everyone can just like be like, hey mom, can you transfer me like, you know, $5,000 because I have nothing left. So I think yeah, that's kind of like how I was able to sustain myself, and being able to be abroad and sustain everything by yourself is also like a skill, and it makes you pretty confident about yourself too.
Yes, you learn to become very resourceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
You
Yeah.
also figure out, yeah, like Justine, what you said about like what you really need and like how much you can live off of and what's really important. It's just like, it's almost like taking yourself out of like your existing life path to go and experience something completely different for a year. And I think it's really awesome. I've actually always dreamed of working in like an Italian cafe or something. I still like think it'd be really fun, but probably not for very long, you know? But I just think like, you know, life is so good in that way too, right? Like that's what I felt. I felt really sad like at the end, even though I knew it was like time to move on, like and be my like very type A ambitious entrepreneurial self later. But it was nice for like 4 months to try something completely different. Yeah.
Yeah, actually this touches on a topic I've been talking about with one of my girlfriends recently. It's because I know I'm here for a temporary period of time. Like there's always the possibility in the realm of possibilities that I might love it and I might end up staying or whatever. I might find a job or a partner, whatever it is that will result in me staying. But for the time being, my mindset going into this is I'm here for a year. And so I
Mm-hmm.
kind of have this like temporary mindset of living here, right? I know it's going to end. I'm not fully committing to being here. I'm not like, for example, I'm moving on Saturday and I'm like, I'm not buying a sofa. I don't need a sofa. I'm only here for a year. Like things like that, those decisions you make because you know you're only here temporarily. So I
Yeah.
wonder like how that changed or shifted your mindset while you were doing your working holiday visas. Did you notice like were you like less committed to things? Did you notice you wanted to kind of like protect yourself and like not get too attached to things? Like what did you notice about being in that temporary mindset? Either one of you, if you have thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. For me, yes, I kind of knew that like I had like the 1 year, sure, I had the possibility to extend, but because I knew I had that 1 year, I wanted to do as much as I can, which means that I couldn't really be attached to a place for too long. Like if I just stayed in like let's say Sydney for the whole month, for the whole year, that means I couldn't really explore on different places. And so I kind of did it like a way where I would stay in a place for like maybe 3 months and then I would move to another one and then to another one short term wise. And that was really fun, like because you get to see so much, you get to meet a lot of people, but that also means you have to say a lot of like goodbyes and like hopefully we'll see each other again. But it's really I didn't really think too much about it, but like during that time, there was like a period where you just know in your heart that like, okay, I think it's time to move on to the next place. Like as much as you have built something already there, but knowing that you don't have that much time, so you would just kind of keep wanting to explore more. And given that like you actually aren't able to like have that many things with you, like I can't afford to buy so many things because you have to keep moving around and like you don't need that many clothes and you just end up like being miserable to move with so many things, right? So yeah, I think that was the mindset. And also being like abroad by yourself, where nobody really knows you anyway, so you just become like really open to like anything that can happen to you. So I think that's like a great thing, like even if it's just that 1 year, like it's good enough for you to experience like that. I don't care. I don't care what people say. I'm just gonna do whatever. Yeah.
Totally. You can like reinvent yourself and also I've noticed in myself, I just say yes to everything now. Maybe I'm saying yes to too much, but like whatever opportunities come up, I'm like, I'm new here. I should say yes. I've never done that, seen that, tried that, eaten that. I should just say yes. And
Yeah.
so you do become more open. You're just like, why not? What do I have to lose? I'm only here for this year, so I should do the thing. And so a lot of saying yes.
That's the
Um,
best mindset. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Ivy, were you thinking about what we're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I never really left that lifestyle, right? That like Joyce was talking about, like that I thought also for 1 year I wanted to do as much as possible. And that actually caused more of a sense of FOMO around what I wasn't doing too. And it was always like, oh my God, there's like so much more to see. I like it's too easy almost for me to let go, even though I really enjoy the cities that I do go into and I really treasure like the month or 2 months that I spend in different places. And this is like beyond the working holiday visa. I've been living my life like that since the working holiday visa. It was the working holiday visa in New Zealand was the first step out to my nomad life. Um, I kind of discovered that I really liked this routine of like picking up and going and like seeing different places. I was like, why don't I make this my like full-time life? And it all started with that.
Um, did you, I think probably because you were traveling with your partner, it's a different experience than Joyce had, but like, were you focused at all on like building community and meeting new people while you were traveling?
Yeah, not in New Zealand as much. I think I kind of already knew that I vibe a lot with Silicon Valley people, like with people who want to start their own companies or are thinking about how do I build like a huge impact with like a startup. And so that's why I got bored of New Zealand pretty fast. Or maybe I didn't spend enough time in Auckland where there might have been more people like that. I think it made me more already it gave me the first step to being aware of what type of friends I enjoy having and like what kind of mindset of people I need to be around. And so when I went to China and I found those things, so after New Zealand, I flew to China to see my grandparents, and then met with like expats and friends of friends who have moved to Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Hong Kong. Like we went to those major cities as well as like some side factory towns for my connections with the previous company I was at, Wish, which is in e-commerce. So I had a lot of connections in China, and through there, talking about the startup ecosystem in China just like lit me up. You know, I was like ready to stay in China and like find a job here. So when you speak about community, I try to meet with like-minded people and imagine like my friend group and like who I would be around and what kind of person I would be if I lived in that city. So I have a lot of like acquaintance friends in all the major cities that I've been to, right? Like and digital nomad have some people who do move around, but I do reflect a lot about how they're not deep friendships because we don't spend time in the same city together. But it's very cool knowing these people, and they definitely inspire me a lot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think like deep friendships are so hard to form as adults. Like it takes a lot of like that history, that time, that trust building. So to meet people while you're traveling is amazing, well and good. It's like it's really hard to form those deep connections for sure. And Joyce, you had mentioned like every time you hopped from one place to another, you had to say your goodbyes. So you must have met some wonderful people during your travels as well.
Yeah, I would say that of course there were like many people like come and go and stuff. Not every friendship or relationship is like very deep, but I was lucky to have met like some really nice people through like jobs or even through like one there was one particular city that I have stayed in, and then I during that time I had like no chance of finding a house at all. So I was like, oh my God, I may have to just live in a hostel for like 3 months straight, which like would be a little bit not the greatest. But like at the end I did find like a house, and then I lived with this like couple, and they were like the nicest people ever, and they treated me so well, and then we would eat together like during nighttime and we would cook together. So it was kind of like a family for like 3 months, like close to 4 months. So it was very difficult to kind of like say bye, but at the same time knowing that like it was like a really true friendship, and I will want to see her again in the future. So yeah, that one was like kind of like bittersweet feelings, but very glad that to have formed good relationships. And the other side of my community was a lot of backpackers because I was one of them. And then so yeah, there's just people coming and going all the time, especially in like hostels and stuff. And I think I just began to surround myself with people who are just like me, who like kind of left their original city or country to come do this working holiday. So there's a lot that we can resonate about, like how, oh my God, we're like, we don't know where we're going next. And then, or like, there's so many places that we want to travel to, or like the feeling of like not being able to keep relationships because people keep going and stuff. So I think being surrounded by that atmosphere like just made me feel like I can really relate to these people. And sometimes even coming back to Canada, like I miss that feeling of, talking with people who are so passionate about traveling. They understand like the struggle of being a foreigner. Whereas if you're just in like a normal city, like most people just talk about like their job or like their house, or I don't know, someone's getting married soon, or they have to do finances and blah, blah, blah. So it's just a very different mindset, yeah, for me.
Absolutely. And I think there's also like you brought something up, a very distinct difference between someone who's just like visiting a foreign country and someone who's living in a foreign country. Like the mindset's totally different and the conversations you have are totally different with people. Yeah.
Hmm.
So we're like close to the end here. I want to finish up with one like final bigger question, I guess. Like what was the plan after the visa was done? What was it like transitioning back into like quote unquote real life? And then if you have like a piece of advice you want to share with folks who are considering working holiday visas.
Oh yeah, I got this. So my original plan was I was gonna do like we got all to apply for a working holiday visa. I'm really glad that we didn't go into the logistics. We can find all that online, but you have to go mostly apply in your home embassy, except for I think Australia, which was an online thing where you didn't have to go to the Canadian, like the Australian embassy in Canada. But I definitely had to for Japan. I don't remember whether I had to for New Zealand. I've looked into other visas for working holiday in Europe. And most of it is you apply in your home country before you even get to that country. And so we got all three, New Zealand, Australia, and Japan, before we even left. So the plan was actually to spend about 4 months each in each country and then go back to Silicon Valley, go back into like the life that we had before. And my goal for it was I wasn't finding the inspiration on where to start a startup and like what value I can bring that was unique amongst my peers. And I was like, let's just toss all the balls in the air and like go do something completely different. But what ended up happening was I got bored after like 4 months in New Zealand, and I was like, okay, I want to, like let's just go to China. The intention was still to go to Japan, but then what ended up happening was that in China, I met a bunch of investors and entrepreneurs who like pointed me towards Southeast Asia and the Middle East and Africa. And I think like the experience of hopping around at a pretty fast pace in New Zealand really led me to be more comfortable with hopping around the world at a fairly fast pace. And it just like turned it all around. So I think my advice around working holiday visas is like, I wish if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would have done more than one. I would have went back to Canada. I would have applied for a few more just to experience living in different places, because the people that you meet and a lot of what where your path goes is the opportunity of the knowledge that you gain, the people that you meet, a conversation that you have, and the more that you expose yourself, especially in your 20s, which is when people do their working holiday visas, it can really change your career for the better. Like I did it to actually up level my career when most people think that it's a career halt. But I think it's an opportunity to gain skills and discover new ideas that other people might not have. And that's a competitive advantage in the workspace right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like even more so now since the pandemic, like having a quote unquote gap in your resume is so much more, it's like less frowned upon and it's much more easily explained. And like I think people value more the time you spend outside of work trying to learn new skills. I think it's changed a lot since the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. I think for me, like after that like 1 year, to be honest, I was getting a little bit like tired of the feeling of like not feeling like I belong somewhere and just kind of like hopping everywhere. So and because like my actually younger brother was actually graduating in Canada, so that I knew that I would kind of come back and at least like attend the graduation and see what happens. So like now I'm still in like Canada, like kind of trying to like adjust to like easing back in again and trying to like search for jobs and stuff. And I would go back to the fact, the point you were saying that having like a gap year or like a working holiday experience does make you stand out when you get to talk to a recruiter or a hiring manager, and they would say like, oh, like interesting, or like, oh, I did something like this when I was younger, or I wish I had done something like this too. And yeah, but some part of me still thinks whether I would want to do another working holiday, because one of my original plans was to go to the UK to do a working holiday, but during that time, I thought the upfront cost was a bit too high for the UK one, especially when we don't know if the world is going to shut down again. I don't want to throw like $2,000 out to apply for the visa, and then they're like, "Oh, you cannot go into the country." So that was like I kind of like pushed that away. But knowing that the UK visa is up till 35 years old that you can apply for as a Canadian. So I'm like not hitting my 30s yet. So I like in my head, I'm thinking like, oh, that's also like a possibility. Like you don't know what's gonna happen. But I will say though, if you are interested or even have a thought of doing a working holiday, you should probably take the chance to do it earlier rather than later, because like when you get like getting older, maybe you have more things to like take care of, more responsibilities, and maybe like set a deadline for yourself, like just say, oh, by this day I'm going to decide to apply, or if I don't. Because if you don't set a deadline, you're just going to keep thinking and thinking and thinking, and then time will pass by and you'll never make the move. So I think setting yourself a deadline and like so once you have the deadline, you know how to plan ahead, and then that's how you can like make that move.
And just take the leap.
Yeah.
Well,
Joyce, for the UK, I actually know of two friends who got a job in the UK in like business and tech and whatever industry they were in, and then got the working holiday visa to bring themselves over first. So you can use it as a way of like looking at what do you want to do for work, where do you want to live too, like, and have a life set up there, and using that as an advantage to using being Canadian, having 30 countries that you can go into for working holiday visa to actually move there for a year or two.
Right. So they have found jobs
Yeah,
already?
their companies transferred them, and they were able to just use the working holiday visa as their main visa to live there and work that job.
As in like they were working in like, let's say originally in the States with the same company, but they moved to the same company, but in a different country.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
I know two people who did that, but I think if you're able to do that, you can also recruit for a UK company and just say, hey, I can figure out my own visa situation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good insight to have. Yeah. Because I've always thought that there's like one barrier with like finding job overseas through online. Is like sometimes they would ask you like, oh, are you eligible to like work here? And sometimes if you're not, then you're just kind of like cut off right off the bat, or they may just
Right, but you can say that you are, like,
yeah.
if you can get a working holiday visa, right? So, yeah.
yeah, this is a good, like, I guess, flipped way of thinking about it. Like we always think we have to acquire the visa first and then the job, but you could acquire the job, then get the visa kind of thing. So smart, really smart. Well, thank you both for joining us today. This was great. I learned a lot, and it made me reflect on the fact that I forgot actually when I researched this. This is also when the pandemic first started. I was like, oh, I got furloughed from my job. Maybe I'll go do a working holiday visa. And that's when I started looking into it. And I didn't end up making it happen for the reason that you didn't end up going to the UK, Joyce, because I was like, what if the world stops? Like, we just don't know how this thing is going to progress. So I was just like, maybe I don't put myself in a foreign country right now. Maybe like in the future would be better. So I took a pause on it. But now that I'm in Taiwan, I was like, what will I do after this year? Maybe a working holiday visa.
Maybe, yeah. Take
So
advantage of it before the 35 mark, yeah.
exactly. So I love that we have this opportunity, and it's open also to many others around the world as well. So hopefully for those of you who have joined us today, like this information was useful for you. And if you have any questions, you can find more information about Ivy and Joyce at their socials, which will be emailed. And yeah, thank you again. And we'll see you hopefully at the next one. Bye.
Thank you, Justine.
Bye.